Muy bien, buenas tardes y bienvenidos a Suicidality in the Family, a Borderline Personality Look. Gracias a todos por estar presentes en la tarde de hoy, como parte del mes de septiembre, ¿verdad? Donde concientizamos sobre suicidio, ¿verdad? Y cómo podemos prevenirlo. Quisimos preparar, ¿verdad? Esta actividad de cierre, donde conocerán más sobre los procesos en torno al suicidio en las familias con un miembro diagnosticado con el trastorno de personalidad limítrofe. Les pedimos, ¿verdad?, que escriban sus preguntas por el chat, donde estaremos pendientes, ¿verdad? O las anoten para entonces al final puedan también abrir sus micrófonos y preguntarle al doctor Fruzzetti. Esta actividad va a ser en inglés, ¿verdad?, por nuestros recursos. Igual pues podemos traducir sus preguntas o comentarios de ser necesario. Les pedimos que pues mantengan sus micrófonos apagados. Todos aquellos que quieran tener sus cámaras encendidas pues son más que bienvenidos. Y pues esperamos que disfruten de la misma. Ahora pues mi compañera María Jiménez le va a dar la bienvenida pues en inglés.
Good afternoon and welcome to Suicidality and the environment. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Suicidality in the Family, a Borderline Personality Look, and thank you all for being here with us. As part of September, which is Suicide Awareness Month, we prepared this activity where you will be able to learn about the process about being around families who have experienced suicide that have a member in their family that are diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. We asked that if you have any questions, you can write them down in the chat and we will be able to see them and help you guys with them, as well as you can write them down and later on ask Dr. Fruzzetti. This activity will be in English. Therefore, if you guys need any help, just translating the questions or comments, we will be here with you. We do ask that if you can, keep the microphones on silent just during the presentation, and we kind of hope that you enjoy it. Now, Dr. Domingo Marque will present Dr. Fruzzetti.
Thank you, Maria.
Number two.
Yeah, we're going to start by presenting Dr. Adam Fruzzetti. Dr. Fruzzetti, we have a microphone open. Over the last 25 years, he has adapted and implemented DBT and developed many successful programs for people living with BPD and other problems with emotion regulation. His research relates to the connection between severe psychopathology and interpersonal and family processes and their interplay with emotion dysregulation. Dr. Fruzzetti is on the board of directors of the National Occasional Alliance for Borderline Personality Disorder, the International Society for DBT, and the Linehan Institute. He is the author of many papers and books and has lectured and trained professionals around the world. Most importantly for me, he's down to earth, always putting people first. And he also makes a mean seafood stew, which I hope I have again sometime soon. So Alan, take it away.
Okay, muchas gracias, Domingo. Muchas gracias for inviting me. It is, Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month, and so I'm really pleased to have this chance to talk to all of you about the important role that families play in suicide prevention, but also perhaps an overlooked piece of this, which is the really painful impact of having a loved one be suicidal on family members. So I'm going to spend some time today talking a little bit about the problem of suicidality, which will include suicide attempts and even painful suicidal thinking, but also self-harm that may or may not at the time carry suicidal intent, but still is very dangerous. I also want to then talk about emotion regulation and start to understand suicidality a little bit through the lens of borderline personality disorder and emotion dysregulation. And then I want to turn our attention and be very practical and talk about, well, what can we do as family members and professionals, but what can we do that's good for us, that keeps our ability high to function in the world, to have a good life, and to therefore be open and available to our loved ones who might be struggling. On the one hand, this is very good for us, and on the other hand, it's very good for them. In between, I'll talk just a tiny little bit about some of the research that we've done. This is not primarily a time for me to focus on our research, but if anybody's interested in the many studies that I will allude to, I'm happy to send them along. Most of them are published and so forth. So again, thanks everybody for coming today, and I hope this is going to be useful for us to spend together. I'll spend about the next, I don't know, 55 minutes or so, give or take a couple of minutes, presenting some of this information to you, and then we'll have time for lots of questions and so forth. Okay, so I want to start. Let me just put up some material up on the screen for you. Okay, so first let's just start with some suicide facts. And I think this is probably an area that you know a lot about already, but I want to review them because it's important to remember that this is an enormous problem. I'm going to mix and match some of these facts from good data from the United States, but also looking at World Health Organization data as well. And it turns out that, of course, suicidality is an international problem. So first of all, approximately 18% of youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. 18%. That's almost 1 out of every 5 teenagers. That's a higher rate for girls than boys. It's a little bit hard to know exactly how they're different. It's hard to get very accurate statistics. But this is an enormous public health and public mental health problem when 18% of youth are at least considering suicide in any given year. About 14%, okay, not quite that whole group, but the majority of that 18% actually made a plan. And again, girls tend to make plans more frequently than boys. Among them, 9% attempted suicide at least once, right? So 18% of the whole population, 14% of them made a plan, and 9% of them, okay? So it's 9% of 14% and 14% of 18%. So it's a very significant number of suicide attempts, at least once. So roughly speaking, about 1/10%, maybe something in that range of all youth have made a suicide attempt, about 1 out of 1,000. And about 3%, about a third of them, and the 3% of 9%, their suicide attempt was significant enough that it required medical attention. We also know that suicide is the second leading cause of death, at least in the Western world, for those 15 to 24 years old, and the third leading cause of death for 10 to 14-year-olds. And the rate of growth among that younger group, the 10 to 14-year-olds, is the fastest in the world. So this is an enormous public mental health problem. Now, I want to be careful to say this is an enormous problem, but I also want to say that completed suicide or death by suicide is still a tiny fraction of all the attempts that get made. Okay, so this is an alarming set of statistics, but think of it as an upside down triangle, where at the top we have a lot of youth, 18% are thinking about suicide, a smaller group, 14% of them, or roughly 2.5% of everybody, of all youth, are making a plan, roughly 9% of them, okay, which is about 1/4% are actually making a suicide attempt. So this is a very significant problem. We also know, just to link it with borderline personality disorder that suicide and non-suicidal self-harm are extremely common in borderline personality disorder. In fact, best estimates suggest that more than 75% of people with borderline personality disorder either engage in a suicide attempt or a non-suicidal self-injury. All right, so this is our background, this is our platform, and why this matters. Now, what makes this particularly complicated is that suicidality is transdiagnostic. Okay, that's a big word. What does that mean? That means that suicide risk is not specific to just one diagnosis. Suicide risk is high with people who have substance use disorders, depression, borderline personality disorder, severe PTSD, as well as other problems such as schizophrenia. It also, the risk level goes up to some extent when there's a family history of suicide, when the person has been a victim of sexual or physical abuse. And in particular, most recently, the most recent events that are present when a person goes on to make a suicide attempt actually are relational. They have to do with a relationship loss or a breach or a rupture in that relationship or some other relationship crisis, which then leads to social isolation. So suicidality is transdiagnostic, but you know what? Borderline personality disorder is also transdiagnostic in the sense that borderline personality disorder is an extreme version of emotion dysregulation, and people with borderline personality disorder almost never only have borderline personality disorder. People with BPD typically also meet criteria for multiple other disorders. That's problematic. That's more a deficit in the way we think about diagnoses, as opposed to, for example, instead of thinking about a person meeting criteria for 7 diagnoses, borderline personality disorder, depression, PTSD, an eating disorder, substance use disorder, and so forth, it may make more sense to think about the person as having emotion dysregulation problems that show up around suicidality sometimes, eating problems sometimes, substance problems sometimes, dissociation sometimes, PTSD sometimes. If we can think about it that way, perhaps it's not so overwhelming for us. We realize that the core problem that we have to treat is emotion dysregulation. We have to help people regulate their emotions, and we have to help them manage relationships better, since relationship problems are such a common leading cause of suicide attempts. So we know that when a person is dysregulated, it's painful. We know that. Now, here's my question for you. Have you ever said something mean to someone that you love? Okay, now, some of you don't have your cameras on, but I hope you're raising your hand. If you're not raising your hand, you're not listening, okay? Because guess what? We're all human beings. We all have 23 pairs of chromosomes, right? And so we do all say mean things occasionally to someone that we love. Now, how do I know that that meant that we were dysregulated when we said it? Well, because if we love the person, by definition, we want to have a good relationship with the person. That's our long-term goal. And being mean gets in the way of that long-term goal. Therefore, it's impulsive, it's reactive, and it comes out of emotion going up so quickly and painfully that we often just push the other person away impulsively or automatically. So that's what emotion dysregulation is. It's when the person focuses on the immediate reduction of their painful negative emotion. And it's almost always reactive and impulsive, especially in BPD. And most commonly, it's social. Right now, it can be reactive and impulsive around, say, a suicide attempt too. But again, on the steps that lead to that suicide attempt, we often find relationship struggles and impulsivity in relationships. So emotion dysregulation, we know, not only does it lead us to do things that are problematic, that push people away, or we treat people we love in ways that we regret when we feel better. When our emotion comes down, I don't know, well, most people come into my office, what they say is, but I didn't mean it. The trouble is, if we're honest, is that when our emotion was this big, we did mean it. It's just that now that our emotion is down, we don't mean it now. Okay, that's the problem, right? So, you know, I have 4 children, mi esposa maravillosa, right? So like we do quite well, okay? And guess what? I do this too. And then I think, oh my gosh, how did I do that? How did I say something mean? I didn't mean that, but in pain, I guess I did mean it. I just don't mean it now. That's, of course, the motivation to do it differently next time. So suicidality is an example of that, being overwhelmed and in great emotional pain, and then impulsively trying to do something to reduce that pain. Interpersonally, we do the same thing. So that's the link back to our families. So family members really do need help. We've done lots of research. I'm not going to give you numbers here. I suspect those of you who are family members, which includes not just people who are here only as family members, but anybody who's here as a professional or as a person with BPD or with suicidality that's looking for some help. We all know somebody else who's struggled, and someone else's struggle, if we love them, becomes in part our own struggle. It's difficult, it's painful to have someone we love also be in pain. Someone we love is suicidal, it's painful for us. Of course, how could it not be? So we know from our research that family members feel a sense of burden and grief. And because of some of the stigma that surrounds suicidality and mental health in general, we know that family members also feel a sense of shame and stigma. Not deserved, not justified, of course, from my perspective, but still out in society, people feel this quite frequently. Family members also feel disempowered. The great paradox of this is that if you have a person in the family who's suicidal, by definition, that person feels very disempowered. But then being a family member, loving them and not feeling like you can do anything to help also feels disempowering. And so we can have 2 loving, caring people who both feel disempowered. So part of what I want to get to today is some of the very key things we can do to re-empower both people, both sides of this relationship, or in the case of bigger families, everyone in the family, that we can be skillful, do things that are good for everybody, not good for me, bad for you, or good for you, but terrible for me, but things that are good for all of us. We also know that family members, parents, and partners get depressed, have anxiety, and sometimes overuse substances too, when they have a family member who's struggling with suicidality or borderline personality disorder. Family members get overwhelmed. It can create problems in other family relationships. Managing one child with suicidality or BPD can lead another child in the family to feel neglected. Helping a parent, a partner who's struggling, can lead to the children feeling neglected. So there are many, many ways in which this is a struggle and a burden for everybody. We also know that it's stressful to the extreme sometimes. So I want to tell you about this for a second. So I just want to be clear that having someone you love in your family making a suicide attempt is extremely emotionally painful for everyone in the family. Suicidality, okay? So here's the person who's suicidal on the left. That has an impact on other people in their family. There's no way around that. Family members are deeply affected. We did a study that we asked people to, just on the internet, to fill out if they were parents or partners or even siblings of someone who was who had made a suicide attempt. And what we found was that overall family members are terrified by that suicide attempt, and they suffer from acute stress disorder and PTSD. 432 people participated in our study with a loved one who made a suicide attempt, and 96% reported experiencing intense fear, helplessness, or horror in response to that event. And more than 95% could be classified with acute stress disorder. And almost half of these family members met criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, where the trauma was their loved one's suicide attempt. So suicide is an equal opportunity, painful experience, not just the horror of someone who is so overwhelmed and in such emotional pain that they would make a suicide attempt, but also for their loved ones. It's really a terrible problem for everybody. So let's come back to to borderline personality disorder and emotion regulation and see how these things are connected. So if we want to understand borderline personality disorder, we're going to put emotion dysregulation in the middle here. Most people who deal with borderline personality disorder suggest that emotion dysregulation is a core feature of BPD. And in fact, we consider it to be the core feature. And if we consider it to be the core feature, you can see the problems around the outside here, the small circles, the satellites, those are the definitions of borderline personality disorder. And as you can see, emotion dysregulation is linked to each one of those. And the arrow goes both directions. So being dysregulated chronically leads to, for example, low self-esteem. But low self-esteem feeds back to create more emotion dysregulation. Similarly, being chronically dysregulated creates other emotion and fears about getting dysregulated. And of course, that itself is more dysregulation. Emotion dysregulation causes problems in relationships, but problems in relationship, they're always dysregulating to us. Anybody who's ever had a pretty big fight with someone you love knows how it ruins your day, and maybe longer, maybe the week, maybe a month, until things get repaired. Now, the two parts over here where the letters are in blue with an asterisk, this has to do with suicidality. When emotion dysregulation gets big enough, people can't stand it anymore. They will do things to try to reduce the pain. And those things are typically impulsive and sometimes dangerous, like a suicide attempt. They also could be attempts to simply numb out, right? So for example, drug overdoses are attempts to numb out, not always with the intention of dying, but accidental overdoses, even without the intention to die, could result in death and are clearly a result of being dysregulated. But of course, if a person survives, having severe substance problems or having made suicide attempts creates further emotional problems. So these just go back and forth and back and forth. So the blue letters over here bring in the idea of impulsivity and suicidality, but also notice that problems in relationships and fears of abandonment link us to our family members. So these are all intertwined and affecting each other. So parents and other family members, partners, siblings, and frankly, good friends, also have an impact on people with BPD. Okay, so here's the family member. That person does something, well, that has an impact. Now, that impact could be beneficial. It could be a a good impact, or it could be problematic and more painful, right? So if you and I are in the same family and I say something mean to you, that clearly has a negative impact on you. No way around that. Even if I later, 10 minutes later, I regret it, okay, I may be able to repair it. But what if I do that a lot? You know, I may not be able to catch up with the repairs, or I may now start to feel so embarrassed about how often I say mean things to you that even trying to go to do a repair makes me feel so overwhelmed and awful, I can't do the repair. You see? So as a family member, you can do something that affects me in a negative way. That means I'm more likely to do something back that affects you in a negative way. And so on, and so on, and so on. And so it goes. So here's the complicated version, okay? So bear with me. This won't take long, I promise. Okay, so something happens. That something could be at school or at work, okay? It could be. It also could be with another family member or a friend, or it could be that maybe I say something mean to you, okay? So in this little example, you're gonna be my partner or my child, my teen or my adult child, okay, or my partner. And in this example, maybe I say something mean, or maybe I'm just not available. And so you're disappointed. That's your emotional response. So number one is you're disappointed. Or maybe if I say something mean, you have hurt feelings. However, that's not the only source of your emotional distress. Number two is you might have a lot of vulnerabilities. And those vulnerabilities also make up borderline personality disorder, like being emotionally sensitive or emotionally reactive, having big reactions, or it just takes a long time to feel better. Other kinds of emotional vulnerability might include simple things like being tired or hungry or lethargic or lonely, okay? So let's say I do something, that's the green box, and you have a certain amount of emotion from that, but you have a lot of vulnerabilities. That makes the emotion in this box get a lot bigger. And then maybe you add to it, maybe you get judgmental of me. What a jerk you are, you say to me. Or maybe you just think it. I'm your parent, or I'm your partner, by the way. How dare you talk to me that way? Or why in the world weren't you there to help me? Okay, and you get judgmental. When you get judgmental, that also makes the emotion go up. Now notice that this arrow goes both ways. That's because as human beings, when our emotion gets big enough, our thinking turns off. Emotion trumps cognition every time. That's evolutionary, right? In our brain development, first we had movement and, like earthworms, I mean, you don't have to have much of a brain to be an earthworm, right? But you have to have enough to move, right? And then there are other infrahumans. And then we developed a midbrain, which has emotion. Emotion gives us information like that. It gets us moving. Either love gets us moving toward each other, right? Anger gets us attacking. Fear gets us running away. Shame gets us hiding because we're embarrassed, right? Emotions have a real purpose, right? But when emotions get big enough, they turn off our cortex, the thinking part of our brain, which was the last part to develop. That's the part that wraps around the outside of our brain. And so when our emotion gets big enough, it turns off our cortex, and then all we can do is see things as threats or no threats, right or wrong, good or bad. There's no nuance. There's no room for anything in between. All right, and when that box gets big enough, guess what? We're dysregulated, and then there's a whole bunch of things that we might end up doing to try to manage that emotion, to bring that emotion down, to re-regulate that emotion. Okay, now that looks like, okay, we already have I'm in the green box here. It's already social. Maybe that's a suicide attempt. Maybe we had a terrible argument and you're afraid that our relationship is over, and you twitched around that with lots of vulnerabilities and lots of judgments and ended up making a suicide attempt, or some non-suicidal self-harm, or drug use, or other impulsive behavior, and so on and so forth. But that's not the end of the story, right? Because look what else happens. See these two arrows? When you get dysregulated, anybody gets dysregulated, we don't express ourselves accurately, including doing all these dysregulated behaviors, right? So for example, making a suicide attempt does not clearly communicate, oh my gosh, I was so lonely. Saying I'm lonely communicates that I'm lonely. Making a suicide attempt does not. It's hard to know, right? Or as my colleague Mary Zanarini says, hitting yourself in the face with a hammer does not accurately communicate being sad about something. So when people do these dysregulated behaviors, or say, which includes, by the way, verbal attacks, right? Like, you're such a jerk, okay? Maybe you say that to me. Well, I don't understand what happened. All I know is that you're calling me a jerk and you're attacking me. And so I almost certainly invalidate you and say, well, no, that's not nice. How dare you call me a jerk? You must be the jerk, right? Of course, that's not a very productive thing to say, but that's the form of many arguments. You're a jerk. Well, you're a bigger jerk. Well, you're a double-sized jerk. Well, you're a triple-sized jerk. Right? That's what, honestly, if we're honest about it, don't most arguments end up like that? I mean, if they keep going, hopefully we stop them before they get to that point. But right, and of course, that invalidating response creates more emotion in this box, right? And when this goes around and around, we call that an argument, right? So here's the problem, right? Everybody knows this. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, oh, I hope this is a great day. I hope that I get invalidated 30 or 40 times today. Nobody thinks that. We all know that being invalidated is painful. The trouble is, it's impossible to validate someone's experience if we don't know what it is. And so if I say, hey, you're a big jerk, and you don't know, you say, no, I'm not, right? That's invalidating, because in this moment, I'm blaming you for something. You might not have done anything, but the fact is, I think you did. And so it's invalidating. And so my emotion gets bigger when you say, no, you didn't. Okay. Or I say, I'm really sad about this. And you say, well, it's no big deal. Don't be sad about that. That stuff happens all the time. You're trying to be kind, but it's totally invalidating the fact that I am sad. And maybe I don't know what to do with that sadness. Maybe I'm not good at taking care of my sadness, right? Your teenager looks in the mirror and says, I'm ugly. And every loving parent says, oh, sweetie, oh, don't say that. You're not ugly, you're beautiful, right? Right? Que guapa. I mean, you don't say, oh, right, que feo. Nobody does that, right? So it's totally loving. And what happens? That's invalidating. If the child is on the edge of being dysregulated, the child is going to then feel invalidated and get more dug in. Now, it's tricky for parents and partners, because if the child's not really dysregulated, you say, oh, sweetie, that's not true. The child can process that information and says, oh, are you sure? And then you say, yeah, I'm sure. And then they feel better, right? So the family member, it's hard to know, right? Because if the expression isn't accurate, it's hard to validate. And of course, when we go around and around and around, number 5 here is that when someone gets invalidated a lot, they get more sensitive and more reactive. So this is we call this a transactional model, because it's a transaction between at least 2 and maybe many more people. The person who's dysregulated and family members, but maybe more than one family member. It may include friends, neighbors, teachers, colleagues or bosses, anybody that doesn't understand can easily invalidate. And sometimes people are just mean. We understand perfectly well and we invalidate anyway. That's not the norm, right? In our families, if I love you, at least sometimes I'm not going to invalidate you. At least sometimes I'm going to be kind. But sometimes, especially when I don't understand, I'm going to invalidate you, not because I want to. And sometimes when we're in this painful cycle, I will say mean things to you that are clearly invalidating. And this kind of goes on and on. All right, so here's the blow up part. See the person who's doing the invalidating? That's you or me. That's the parent or the partner or the sibling or the best friend. The person doing the invalidating, the inaccurate expression is their event, right? Then they're affected by their own negative emotion and their own judgments and their own vulnerabilities. So the poor family member doesn't understand and may be really scared and then get dysregulated, him or herself, which of course leads to further invalidation. Okay, now I want to talk about reciprocity for just 1 second, and then we're going to talk about practical things we can do. Reciprocity just means, right, that suicidal people with BPD, have an impact on their family members, and parents and other family members have an impact on the suicidal person, people with BPD. So this goes around. Now, in this case, I got optimistic and put a happy face on this one because we can turn this around if we get skillful. If we know what to do, we can really reduce the chances of us invalidating something, even if we don't understand it. We can really do that. Now, here's the problem. Okay, it's hard. Okay, so what can we do to be effective? Now, I want to emphasize, because it's a cycle, because it's reciprocal, what I do affects you, what you do affects me. That means some things we're going to do are just good for us, because then it's good for the other person too. And some things are going to be good for the other person, and then they're going to be good for us too. So it's to help ourselves and our loved ones. It's not sacrificial. No sacrifices in this, okay? No sacrifices, just skillfulness. All right, so here are the 5 steps that I want to cover today in brief. There are many, many more, but these are core ones around suicidality in a family member. Okay, so let's look at each one of these for a minute. Okay, so the first one is shame and stigma. Shame and stigma have been around for as long as we've had any society, any social groups. We call something stigma when it's a broadly held judgment about something. People who don't understand mental health problems can get very judgmental. They can say things like, you're just not trying hard enough. You're just lazy. Okay. Oh, the problem is you've just never had to face any negative consequences. Now, when you say this to somebody with BPD or somebody who's suicidal, oh my gosh, is that wrong? It's judgmental and wrong. People with that kind of pain sure know that have faced over and over painful consequences. So if we're going to change stigma, which is a broadly held set of judgments, we have to do it one person at a time. Okay, so it starts with, okay, in our family, we have a mental health or suicide crisis. Somebody's suicidal. Maybe they self-harmed and went to the psychiatric emergency room. Maybe they made a suicide attempt and ended up in the hospital. Now, assuming that somebody else knows about that, right? Then when somebody else knows about that, it initiates this whole cycle of shame and stigma. First, somebody gets judgmental because they don't understand how painful it is. They might be judgmental of your family member who's made a suicide attempt, and that feels terrible. So we often defend our family member and then get criticized for it. Or they're judgmental of us, like, what did you do wrong? This is your child. What's wrong with you? This is your spouse, okay? And when enough people do that, we call it stigma. If it's just one person, we call it judgment, okay? But when it's a whole social group, we call it stigma. That leads, oh, now we feel more shame and more distress. We've just been criticized, or our loved one who's in terrible pain has been criticized for having some kind of mental health crisis or a suicide crisis. So guess what we do when we feel ashamed? Remember that urge? Our emotion system says, feel ashamed, hide, right? Because then nobody's going to clobber you, okay? And so when you hide, you don't get help, you don't get support. And when you don't get help and support, you're left out there all on your own, under a lot of stress and burden, and situations typically get worse without help because it's difficult or impossible to do this on our own. So then as things escalate and get worse, there's more severe distress and inaccurate expression. I don't now talk to my neighbor. I don't talk to my brother or my sister, okay, about the struggles in our family because I'm embarrassed and they're judgmental. But then, 2 months later or 6 months later, my child or my partner has another mental health crisis or another suicide attempt, and the cycle starts all over again. And so, of course, the good news is there's something we can do about this. That's the good news. Okay, so what can we do? Well, to reduce shame, we have to act opposite to that urge to hide and instead reach out. Now, before you yell at me saying, why would I want to reach out to somebody who's judgmental of me? Hang on, okay? Of course, we want to reach out to somebody who's less likely to be judgmental. And that could be somebody that you're genuinely close to. So if they are judgmental, we can help them learn how not to be. Don't forget, people invalidate when they don't understand. If I can help my brother or my sister or my best friend understand something about mental health problems, something about suicidality, their judgments and their invalidation are going to go down. And when their judgments and invalidation go down, now they're available to provide help and support to me. So we've got to go out and talk about our experiences with other adults. We simply have to do this. We can't hide. If we hide, the shame gets bigger, our avoidance gets bigger, we don't get any help, we feel more burden, and we get crushed by it. And that's the almost 50% of people in our study who ended up with PTSD. The good news is, this is, by the way, the treatment for PTSD in this situation is to, believe it or not, is to talk about our experiences in descriptive ways with other adults and have them support us. Are guilt and shame justified? Almost certainly not, right? It's not our fault. There's no blame. It's sad, it's awful, but it's nobody's fault, right? If we want to understand why might someone become suicidal, we go back to our model, our transactional model for emotion dysregulation, because they have vulnerabilities and negative events, and they don't know how to handle such big, intense, painful emotions. And then after a while, they may do things to try to impulsively feel better, reduce that painful emotion. If you want to understand why somebody does it, go back to that. Don't say, well, it's my fault. It's your fault. No wagging fingers in this. So we're going to describe instead of judge. This is what happened, not it shouldn't have happened. This is how it feels, not it shouldn't bother me. It does bother me. Of course it bothers me. And we're going to keep talking about our experience. This is not gossiping about our loved one. It's describing, I'm so sad because my spouse or my child is suffering. And anybody you know that cares about you, if they slow down and understand, I am sure they can validate and support you. And that's what we need, is validation and support. And we have to keep seeking that support from our friends and family. All right, Now, the next thing, of course, is fear. We've got to reduce our fear because, oh my gosh, once someone we love has made a suicide attempt, their life is rarely just all better 2 weeks later, right? They may be getting into treatment, they may be getting better, but they might still have days or maybe even weeks or longer where they're not doing well. And it's easy to think, oh my gosh, there's going to be another suicide attempt, and to stay at red alert with fear all the time. Okay, but the reality is that's not valid. There isn't danger all the time. So the first thing is to say, what about right now? Stop thinking about what might happen tomorrow or next week or next month or in 5 years. What's going on right now? Oh, well, my child is sitting there texting on his or her own phone. Well, that looks pretty safe to me, unless they get a repetitive thumb injury, right? That's not too dangerous, right? That's not life-threatening. Okay. So I want everybody right now to think about something you're worried about, okay? If you have had a suicidal person close to you who's been suicidal, I want you to think about that person. And I want you to notice that at this moment, that person is safe right now. And I want you to take a deep breath of safety and relax your body. We're talking about really painful things, and your fear might be going up. Right now, it's safe. And I can do that again in 5 minutes, and I can do that again this evening, and I can do it again before I go to bed. And boy, am I giving my brain a break when I notice that right now. Could something be different tomorrow? Maybe, but tomorrow hasn't happened yet, right? So if my child or my spouse might be suicidal tomorrow, well, that will always be true. So therefore, should I stay at red alert for the rest of my life? No. How about, well, they're not doing that right now. Whew. Okay, let's not worry about tomorrow. We're only in this moment now. That's all we got, by the way. That's all we ever have is right now. The future, we get there, but then it's right now. The past, that's long gone. We don't have that anymore. So your loved one is safe right now. I would encourage you to notice this many, many, many times a day if fear follows you around. You've got to say to the fear, thank you very much. You're trying to tell me fear has a purpose, which is to get us to make things safe. But once we do that, fear no longer serves that purpose, right? If I had a car crash 2 weeks ago, fear makes a lot of sense in the middle of a car crash. But now maybe you come to pick me up to go to take me to work because I'm not driving, or to help me get to the bus because, I'm still hobbling a little bit from the car crash. I'm afraid to get in your car. Well, that makes sense because my brain is saying cars, danger, crash. But it's not calibrated. It's not tuned. I have to add now. Oh, now. No car crash now. No danger now. You're a safe driver. Your car is not doing anything unsafe. Safe now, not danger now. That was unsafe 2 weeks ago. And it might take me a few times before my fear comes all the way down. But notice, I will always have had that fear, but it is no longer justified. Safe right now. So acting opposite to the fear urges, it might be to run away. The urge might be to try to over-control your loved one. I'm going to follow you around. You can't go out of my sight. You can't go out. Instead, we've got to actually live life, engage in life. So if it's my teenager, I've got to say, yes, of course you can go to your friend's house. Go. I'm scared. I'm so scared that what's going to happen? I can't see them. The first time they've been out of my sight in 3 weeks since that suicide attempt 3 weeks ago. But then I got to just sit down and notice my teenager is safe right now, is going to a friend's house. I know who that friend is. And enjoy the safety. And when my child comes home for dinner, okay, that was successful. If we do that 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 times, our fear will stop coming up so much. It'll stay down. We've got to get active, and we've got to bring our attention with us. It's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to go for a walk and get away from this situation. But then if I keep thinking about the situation while I'm on my walk, I'm not really getting the walk, right? I got to take my mind with me. I've got to take my attention with me. Like, enjoy the walk, enjoy the rest of my life. There's way more to each of our lives than the one thing that was very dangerous, or might be dangerous again, but isn't in this moment. We've got to get our brains to open up and notice the entirety of it, not just the one really scary part. And we got to repeat and repeat and repeat until fear goes down, because fear will exhaust us and lead to PTSD. Okay, take a deep breath, because that's hard. All right, now the next one is to stay connected to your loved one. Now, this is not, notice it doesn't say control your loved one. Okay, it doesn't say don't let your loved one out of your sight. It means stay emotionally connected to your loved one. Okay, so what does that mean? That means first, manage our own emotions. Before I come and say, how was your day? Like, relax. Don't come. So, are you okay? Okay, how would you like it if every day when you walked in the door, somebody came up, are you okay? Are you okay? What happened? Are you okay? Oh my gosh. Like, now we're both, like, it's like putting our fingers in the electrical socket. It's like, oh, this is not a fun way to start our conversation. How about managing my own emotion, noticing that you're home and safe, and then, sweetie, how are you? How was school? How was work? How was your visit with so-and-so? What's up? What do you want for dinner? You know, like, let's manage our own emotions and then engage, right? Bring warm attention to our loved one. Remember, this is somebody we love, right? Oh, right. They're not just an object of fear or anger. There's love there. And what's it like to be the other person? Maybe you're sitting there looking really unhappy. What's it like to be you? Well, you look unhappy, but I don't know why. So instead, I could try to understand it by saying something like, gee, sweetie, you look unhappy, right? What, something going on? Notice there's curiosity there, not demand. There's love and curiosity, not demand and fear. Okay, that connection is good for us. It's also good for our loved ones. And that allows us, once we understand something about the person's experience, it allows us to validate, right? We can validate their experience because now we understand it. And sometimes we move on to problem solve collaboratively when needed, patiently, not urgently, not with fear, but like, hey, I'm wondering about, you know, it seems like you've been having a harder time lately. Is that true? You know, yes, it is. Well, could we sit down and talk about what, I don't know, what you could do, what I could do to make that better, right? Notice love and attention and curiosity, and in this case, purpose, some problem solving, not fear, demand, and control. Now, sometimes that's the segue to, sometimes that collaboration is around safety. Now, we have to reduce our own fear, or we're going to try to control. That's what, by the way, humans do when we get scared, is we either run away, get overwhelmed, or we try to stay and control the situation. That works really well for the first 30 seconds. If I'm making dinner and something catches fire on the stove, staying and trying to control the situation is a great idea, right? Assuming I don't get dysregulated, I can think, where's the lid? Grab the lid and put it on the pot, problem solved, right? There's nothing wrong with controlling the situation when it's a frying pan on fire. But what about if it's you? Anybody? Okay, so show of hands. How many people love being controlled by another person? Yeah, if your hand's going up, now we also know you weren't paying attention, right? This is nobody's idea. No, there is no culture. There is no gender. There is no age where, oh, I love it when you try to control me. Yeah, no, this is awful. And we resist and we push back and it becomes one of those ugly arguments, right? So instead of trying to control or running away and being overwhelmed, reduce our own fear, create some time, slow down, and notice that it's safe now. Then invite the other person to collaborate. Sweetie, I'm worried about you. What are you worried about? I don't know, you just don't seem happy. Right? I'm not worried you're going to kill yourself because you're not doing anything. It's safe right now. I'm not going to say I'm worried you're going to kill. You just seem unhappy. Are you doing okay? What's going on? Asking, getting information. And the person says, well, yeah, I have been really, really miserable. I've had some urges to use drugs, or I've been suicidal. It's like, okay, I'm so glad you told me. Well, let's think about what we can do to make it safe and to feel better. Because it's not just about staying safe. It's also about feeling better, right? They're both important. You can't have one without the other, right? You can't have safety in the long term without feeling better. And you can't feel better if you're dead. So you got to have both parts. And it's important to work on both parts. So more listening than talking, that's hard and it's essential. And collaborating on the solutions together. Like, well, what do you think? What do you think would be helpful? What could I do to help you? It doesn't mean we can't make a specific suggestion, but more listening than talking, more inviting than pushing. And if it doesn't work, seek professional help, right? That's absolutely essential. There's a safety net, a social safety net, which is professional mental health services, and it's important to do that when needed. And then, of course, last but not least is taking care of ourselves. If we don't take care of ourselves, we certainly, A, are going to be miserable, and B, unable to help anybody else. So taking care of ourselves is ultimately not a selfish act. Taking care of ourselves also means that we have more energy and patience and love and less fear and anger to bring to our loved ones. So that means we have to take care of our body. That's actually very important. Fear gets in the way of sleep. Anger gets in the way of sleep. Right? Some of us eat too much when we get distressed. Some of us don't eat enough, right? So it's not about weight. It's about balancing your eating. Eating enough healthy for your body to be okay. You know, you're not starving and you're not feeling yuck because you just ate way too much of something that wasn't so great, you know. Enough sleep, enough exercise, and enough body wellness, taking care of your body, taking care of whatever ills you might have, taking care of our emotions, soothing our senses, doing things like taste, touch, smell, right? Sound, vision. You know, look at things that are enjoyable to look at, smell things that are enjoyable to smell, listen to things, listen to music that you love, listen to the sound of a voice that you love. Do these things because soothing our senses soothes our body, and soothing our body is good for our body. And then it's, of course, our emotions live in our bodies, so it's also good for our emotions. And then, of course, increase enjoyable activities. Do things that bring joy. Do things that bring connection, because that changes our emotion. And then we have more room to balance our worries and our sadness and other emotions. And of course, increase social support, not just the kind I talked about earlier about decreasing shame and stigma, but actually to increase fun in your life. Like, go have fun with other people and get support too around difficult things, but go have some fun. By the way, go support other people too. That's part of reciprocity as well. Okay, now I just want to say before I wrap up that these skills actually work. They actually do. There are dozens and dozens of studies, from family connections studies, of which there are now many, many. We have studies about DBT. Full disclosure, I've I've been running DBT programs for 30 years now. And DBT with parents and couples and families, when we do interventions with family members, they work. We have good evidence. It's good for them and it's good for their loved ones. And skill programs for parents and couples and families. These things actually have good data. So the conclusion is, all right, you've already heard this. Family members need skills and support. Okay, family members are relevant and important to our loved ones who are suicidal and have BPD. And actually, in studies that make it very clear that the better we do and the more connection we have with our loved ones, the better outcomes they have. It actually facilitates good treatment. And their outcomes and our loved ones' well-being clearly transacts, it reciprocates, it comes back, and it's important, and it makes our life better too. Okay, so I think I want to stop here. And I think we have time for some questions.
Sí, gracias al doctor Fruzzetti, ¿verdad? Para este periodo corto de preguntas, pues le vamos a pedir que aquellos que están interesados en utilizar su micrófono, ¿verdad? Levanten la mano que está por ahí para que puedan hacer sus preguntas abriendo el micrófono. Y las preguntas expuestas por el chat, ¿verdad? Si hay alguna, pues las estaremos también haciendo en breve. Y María por ahí nos va a dar el anuncio en inglés.
Double de gracias, Dr. Fruzzetti. For the questions, we ask that you raise your hands so we can give you the turn if it is that you guys prefer to use a microphone. If not, we will be asking the question posed in the chat. During the chat, we will give you a few minutes if you want to write the question.
Maria, I have one that we get all the time. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I changed venues. So Alan, one thing we get all the time from family members is that for them it's counterintuitive, and they have the judgment that they're basically doing bad parenting when they have a suicidal, let's say, adolescent or any family member or loved one, and they, you know, we talk about how to be reactive about everything, right? For them, it's counter intuitive, and they want to basically react to everything, know everything, listen to every phone call if they can, and pay attention to it. They're very reactive. So what would be, you know, your assessment of this, and what would you recommend these parents or family members to do?
Well, that's a great question. And that, Domingo, I think you're exactly right. That's a super common situation. I think there are two parts here. One I already spoke about, which is this idea of purposefully noticing safety to try to reduce the fear. Because that level of, I've got to check your phone, I've got to check your social media, I'm going to put something on your phone so I know where you are. Okay, those kinds of things. Those are born of love and fear, right? And I'm not saying the love isn't there, but the fear gets that kind of what I'm going to call, without any judgments, a kind of a controlling behavior, right? And so if we can reduce the fear, the love is still going to be there. And if we can reduce the fear, then there's more room for awareness and curiosity, like what's effective, what actually could be helpful here. And then it's also, then that's part two. The second thing, which I didn't really talk about, was one little line, I didn't spend much time on it, which is, okay, what would it be like to be you? Okay, so Domingo, you know, so so I don't have my phone in here with me, but I look at my phone, oh, I can see that you're, you know, on Avenida de, you know, something or other, you know, and I can see that, oh, you said you were going to stop at the store, but you didn't. Okay, how are you feeling, Domingo? I mean, I just did two things. How are you feeling?
Persecuted and invalidated.
It doesn't feel good, right? Now,
No.
if I really think that it's not a big deal, I can ask you, right? But I got to listen. But in reality, if I put myself in your shoes and I think, how would it feel? Okay, okay, so here's the truth. Okay, I live a boring life. I don't go any place that I would mind if all of you knew where I went, okay? Because I don't go any place that interesting, okay? However, I don't want you following me around.
Exactly.
Okay. And I think all of us, if we put ourselves in those shoes, like how would it feel to have somebody checking? I mean, like I don't know, I get 100, 150 emails a day. You know, it's like, you want to go through those and read my responses? You go right ahead. It's not going to be exciting. But then I think, no, it's none of your business. You know, I would not like it, even though there's really nothing very interesting there.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's interesting to me, but not generally interesting. So if we put ourselves in the other person's shoes, that might slow us down. Like, you wouldn't like it. And then I say, oh, but you're not safe. Then say, okay, I'm worried about safety. Are you safe? Well, Domingo, you're sitting in your car. You're talking to me. You're perfectly safe.
Yeah.
You're 100% safe right now, right? Oh, right. Good point. So now maybe maybe next weekend we can have a talk. How's it going? And, you know, how's your suicidality? And what can I do to be helpful? Maybe I can ask you, you know, and then there might be something you might even suggest. Well, you checking in with me could be helpful. I say, okay, how often? You know? All right, great. Now we have a plan. Or any of 1,000 other plans.
And I also think that it perpetuates the idea of this person being like a mental health patient and a frail person.
That's right.
And leads to self-invalidation when.
That's right. That's right. If I say, well, you know, you're all upset at me for, you know, following you around and checking your social media because you have borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
No, anybody at any age would be upset with me for doing that. Nobody likes that. By the way, I'm not saying that when your child is a very young age and you first allow them access to a phone or social media, that it's not I'm not saying at that young age, yes, of course, parents check to make sure that they're using it in a healthy and safe way, of course. But once they are, and at a certain age, then that's off they go.
Thank you, Domingo. We had a raised hand by Migdalia. I don't know if she has a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you. So, an excellent presentation, Dr. Fruzzetti. I was just wondering, what can we do to include more participation from the families in the therapies?
Maybe you can tell me in what situation, where are you struggling to get more participation?
Just in general, how we can involve more the families with you know, with personal struggle with emotional dysregulation.
Mm-hmm. In a clinic situation, you mean, like in treatment? Yeah. Great question. So I think that first we have to understand what gets in the way of their participation. And I'm not sure I know, you know, I haven't spent nearly enough time in Puerto Rico to understand what that might be, but I'm guessing that there's quite a bit of overlap. Here, the things that typically get in the way are, number one, some professionals have blamed the family member and been judgmental and invalidating. So if that's the case, we've got to overcome that. We've got to do a repair on behalf of the profession. The good news is this approach is so completely 100% non-blaming that if people give us 10 minutes, they'll start to realize that we're not blaming anybody, that this is not a judgmental intervention at all. So that's one hypothesis, is to really try to engage them, like teach them the transactional model right away and talk to them about how, oh my gosh, how hard it must be to be a parent or a partner of somebody with those kinds of struggles, because it's very, very painful. Tell them about our study where half of the people who participated met criteria for PTSD. Like, wow, because that's validating perhaps, likely, of their experience. So that's one thing that gets in the way. Another thing that gets in the way frequently is that the popular media tends to, we live in an age of everything is about biology or neurobiology. But in reality, borderline personality disorder and suicidality are not because of a gene. They aren't biologically driven. Yes, we have bodies. Yes, we have brains. We have neural connections. But it's our psychological and social activities, in addition to our biological vulnerabilities, that drive suicidality and drive borderline personality disorder behaviors. And so we might have to say to them, you know, it doesn't matter how somebody develops it. If you want to think that it's more of a biological disorder, you can. That's not really what the evidence tells us, but it doesn't matter because we have no medicine for this. What we have are programs that are really good for family members and also good for their loved ones. And so focus on how it might be good for them to participate. Like our family connections data and our family skill data shows how much their sense of burden and grief and distress and depression go down when family members participate. So there's really something in it for them as well as their loved ones. Is that helpful, Migdalia?
Yes, thank you very much. I enjoyed your presentation. It was really eye-opening.
Okay, thank you.
We have a question in the chat. Raquel asks, has this worked well in families with multiple members with BPD or BPD and other disorders that might provoke each other?
Okay, the shortest answer I'm going to give you all day. Yes. Maybe I'll give you a couple sentences to add to that. But yes, that's a great question. And the answer is yes, because it's a reciprocal or transactional model, we're just taking turns being in different roles, right? Remember, I said everybody gets dysregulated sometimes, right? So you could have a parent or a partner who's very infrequently dysregulated and a loved one who's frequently dysregulated. This model works really well. But you can also have two or more people who are frequently dysregulated because everything we do is good for both of them. The skills are good for both sides. And I say both, that could mean 5 people in the family. It might be that the entire family can benefit from this. And I also want to add that it's very important, built into the model is the idea that when we talk about dysregulated behavior, we're not talking about like being loud or something. There are lots of cultural differences about how people communicate. And those are all healthy. They're just like how we do things. Dysregulated is dysregulated in that social and cultural and family context, right? So you might have a family that's very gentle with each other. And so even a medium amount of anger is very destabilizing. That same amount of anger in a family that's more expressive might not be a problem at all, right? So we wouldn't call it dysregulated, right? Dysregulated is when it's out of control and doing damage.
Thank you very much. I also see that Daricel has a question. So Daricel, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you so much. So I was wondering what possible suggestions you may have to offer when we have family members that we try to explain to them as best as possible what BPD is and how, it kind of just shows up within a family system. And these family members are really, challenging kind of to try and make them understand or help them understand, right? That we can't change this person, right? So a lot of family members come in asking, how do I get them to love me and smile at me and just basically just do a 180, right, with their interactions. And I was wondering if there's like any particular techniques or tips and tricks that we can maybe implement in therapy.
Oh boy, that's a great question without a short answer. So I spend a lot of my professional time training therapists to work with families with BPD and suicidality, because so many therapists don't, because they either don't know how to, or it's hard, right? So I'm reluctant to give you much of an answer because it's a big answer. I mean, there are dozens of things we can do. But I think that the idea is to maintain our own curiosity. Like, like I might say, to you, like that you're one of the family members who's just like, I don't know. So try it with me, play with me. Say something back to me. I just explained the transactional model and you're not buying it. You're just not there. So try it with me. I'll give you an example at least.
Okay, so maybe I did have a family member come to me once and be like, well, I don't understand why they're so upset with us. We do everything because we love her, and I don't know why she keeps blaming us. All we do is do the best we can for her, and we really care about her.
I totally get. You are full of love and always do the best you can. I think part of what I'm trying to help you see, though, is that would you admit that is this your daughter we're talking about, or your spouse or something?
Yes. Yeah. Daughter.
Would you say that your daughter is really, really good at expressing herself accurately and clearly?
No.
I'd have to agree with you there. And because of that, I guess what I'm trying to say is you probably don't understand her very well. How could you? I'm not blaming you. I'm not saying you should. I'm saying you probably don't, because she's not giving you that information. Here's the thing. She doesn't understand her that well. That's hard for her too. So that's what we're working on, is helping her do a better job expressing herself accurately. If you can understand it, then you doing the best you can is going to be plenty good enough, right? Here's what I mean. Like let's imagine we're supposed to go for a walk together, right? We're just friends, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And on the way out, I'm supposed to meet you, in the park, right? And on the way out the door, I trip on my stairs and I twist my knee. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think, I'll just walk to the park. It'll probably be fine. Maybe I even stop and get some ibuprofen or something, and I think, I'll be fine. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you. So we'll go for a walk. So I walk to the park, which is just a short walk. And now it's very painful. And you're not there yet. So I sit on the park bench. And then a minute later, you come along and you say, okay, let's go. All right. So now you don't know anything about this, right? You don't know that I twisted my knee. You don't know that I'm in terrible pain. And I say, I don't feel like going for a walk.
Okay.
And you just worked very hard to walk here to meet me, not be late. Okay. And I said, I just don't feel like it.
Okay. So as a family member, I might feel a bit of rejection, maybe even because like after I did all this and then now you don't want to go on a walk.
That's right. And it just seems like I'm just being lazy and not very thoughtful of you. But maybe I'm so embarrassed because I felt very clumsy. And I'm just embarrassed to tell you that I tripped on my own shoelaces. And I'm embarrassed that I did that. So I don't tell it to you. And then I say, well, why are you making such a big deal out of this? It's not a big deal. You can go for a walk without me.
Mm-hmm.
See, we're kind of digging in. And unless you have the most patience of anyone on the planet, pretty soon you're going to be upset with me, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Right? Now that's a great example of I'm not expressing myself accurately and you end up invalidating me.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for that example.
And of course I would just add, so what if when you walked up, I said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm a little embarrassed. I tripped over my own shoelace and I twisted my knee and it's all swelled. It really hurts to walk. I don't think I could go for a walk with you. Would you be willing to just sit in the park bench and hang out with me for a while?
Yeah, that would definitely change the interaction a lot.
No kidding, but that's accurate expression. That's when my
Mhm.
emotion's not getting in the way. I'm not dysregulated. And then you're kind and validating. I'm sure you would say, oh, that's too bad. I'm sorry. You know, we would have a fine and we could have a nice visit on the park bench.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. That was really enlightening. I love the presentation, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I had a question. I think it's the opposite of what Domingo was trying to exemplify earlier in terms of what fear drives us to. That sometimes we want to escape, right? And when we do that, often we just desensitize ourselves to the suicide attempts or the self-harm behaviors. How can we show family members that there is something good out of feeling that fear and be close to the person when that fear is telling us just run away or don't feel enough because this is going to happen again and you will get hurt?
So, Naomi, so my question for you is, so the first thing I would think to do would be just to take a short break. So I might say to you, okay, and pardon me, but I'm going to say, sweetie, right? Mi amor, you know, it's like, I need a minute, you know, I mean, and sometimes I might just say, I need to use the toilet. Okay, I just need 2 minutes. And then I go and I splash a little cold water in my face and I got to bring my emotion down. Okay. So the question back to you. So imagine that you did that. Now, how does that help? Is that enough? Or now, how does that change the situation? That's a very simple, hard to do it, but simple to identify, quick, like, don't make it worse, right? Like, stop, figure this out first. Try to bring my emotion down first. So what would happen then? Would that be helpful, or would that be not nearly enough?
That may be helpful in terms of trying to bring up the rational mind and to think things through and to think about the love that is shared in that family. And at the same time, sometimes when people try to not feel and to go away, it's just a mechanism to protect themselves and try to not be hurt again, because sometimes they see the pattern in behaviors as a way to, oh, you are doing this again, I will not deal with this again, I'm tired.
Right. Okay, so would you be willing, Naomi, to you do the thing? I'll be the family member. Okay, so you do whatever it is you're doing.
Okay.
Am I your spouse or your parent?
So let's say you're my spouse and you have been feeling sad and you have thought about suicide as an option.
You have.
Okay, I'm the.
Yeah, you're the suicidal one.
Okay, I am the suicidal one. Okay. So I'm just tired, you know, I'm just tired. Things aren't going great. And I just don't want to live anymore. I don't want to be here. And I know it hurts you, but I don't want to do this again. I just want to end my life.
So sweetie, so I just went and splashed some cold water in my face and I've come back. Okay, so sweetie, obviously that this is very upsetting for me, right? And it's awful for you. Can we just sit down and talk about it for a minute? Would that be okay? Can we just sit and talk?
But you always say that you're tired of this, that you're tired that I am threatening you with killing myself.
Yeah, but notice I'm not saying that right now. I'm not. I'd actually I want to try to understand this better.
You say that, but then you again start attacking me.
Well, I'm not attacking you now, and I'm going to try really hard not to. You know what my middle name is?
Which one?
Listen, don't talk. That's my new middle name. Listen, don't talk.
Yeah, right. Since when?
Okay, I'm going to give you the zipper. You have the power of the zipper on my mouth. Okay, I want to listen. I think I get really scared, and then I think I do try to. I don't think I think I make it worse for you. I don't think I make it better, right? So I'm going to try to. You promise not to kill yourself today. I'm happy to listen and not talk.
That may work for now.
Okay. Well, there is just today, right? That's all we got, right? This isn't a trick, by the way. I mean, I used to go by this bar that had a sign out front that said free beer tomorrow. Right? Right. And but of course, you go back tomorrow, the sign still says free beer tomorrow, right? So
yeah.
Anyway, so so the idea is for us both to just really turn the volume down, turn the controlling down. If I'm not demanding and unpleasant to you, your need to run away goes way down.
Mm-hmm. That's
right.
correct.
Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to, at some point, maybe I insist that you go to the hospital or we call a therapist or something. I mean, that I'm not suggesting. Your mental health well-being is not my responsibility. Mm-hmm. But if you're my spouse, our relationship is my responsibility. Yours too, but mine, right? And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to stay, honestly, I might be thinking it's not such a great spouse who's going to be dead. You can't be a good spouse if you're dead. But I'm not going to say that to you because that's just hurtful, right? So, but I want to be a good spouse, right? And I want you to too, which means I want you to stay alive. I don't want you to be dead either. So if we can just sit down and I can say, okay, so what happened today? Because you didn't, something happened and you're feeling worse. What happened? Or who knows? There are 1,000 ways to go. But the idea is, can I manage my own emotion? Can I remember my goal, which is to have a good relationship with you? Can I put myself in your shoes? What's it like to be you? And I say, no, I really can't. So then I've got to ask questions and I got to listen and really try to understand. And then out of that comes connection, because eventually I'll understand something. And when I understand it, I can validate it. And if I validate you, I can't imagine that you don't feel better, at least in that moment. It doesn't mean you'll give up suicidality, but at least in that moment, you'll feel more connected and you'll feel better. And we can build on that. And that's the idea. And that's hard. For anybody who's thinking, oh my gosh, who's in this situation, this is hard. It's not short. It doesn't happen in one conversation or 10. It's more like 100 or 300. And often, and professionals usually need to be involved, right? So this is not easy. But I want to be clear that what makes it hard is that it just takes a long time. The principles aren't too complicated. I mean, they really are these few things that we're talking about. Is that helpful, Naomi?
Yes, it was. And I thank you because it's a good way of giving an example to the people in the audience of how to approach effectively whenever our loved one or our patient is hurting, and it's thinking about suicide as an option to end
right.
that.
Right. And honestly, I really need to use that. You're talking to me, you're not killing yourself right now. So even though you're saying you want to kill yourself, you're not doing it right now. That helps me not to panic. And I know I can call, an ambulance in 10 minutes if I have to, but I don't have to do that now because you're willing to talk to me.
Thank you. Any other questions from people in the audience? Going one, twice, thrice. Agradecemos a los programas de BT, de la Ponce Health Science University, de la Universidad Albizu en sus recintos de San Juan y de Mayagüez, ¿verdad? Porque siempre nos ayudan en estas actividades y están presentes. Al público en general le damos las gracias por estar aquí, familiares, clínicos y demás que están con nosotros. Al doctor Fruzzetti, gracias de verdad por tan amablemente acceder a nuestra invitación. La verdad es que nos hemos disfrutado y aprendido mucho durante esta hora, así que le damos las gracias. María, por ahí.
English version. We do thank the DBT programs from Ponce Health Science University and the Albizu University in San Juan and Mayagüez campuses for being present, as well as our Dr. Adam Fruzzetti. Thank you so much and kindly for accepting the invitation and being here with us and role playing. That was a treat. I loved it. I was here for it. I was almost gonna make something up just so I could do a role play, but we had most of it. It was amazing. So thank you so much for accepting this invitation. We enjoyed and learned a lot during this hour and a half. And thank you everybody for being here. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias. Buenas noches.
Thank you, Alan. Bye.
Gracias, doctor. Buenas noches a todos. Que estén
Thank you,
bien.
everyone. Thank you, doctor.
Gracias, buenas noches.
Bye.
Nos pueden seguir en Instagram y en Facebook, TPL Puerto Rico, @BPD Puerto Rico. Así que gracias.
Bye.
Adiós.
Promo, amazing promo to those social medias, amazing talent.
No se me puede olvidar.
Of course not.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.